Well, speaking about British-European relations, let's go on to our next topic. And we're asking whether you are happy to pay more for food as a result of Brexit. 0207 862 2222 is the number. New physical border checks on goods imported from the EU, this is including meat, fish and dairy, have come into force. Now, the government believes that the related charges will cost British firms around £330 million annually and see food inflation rise over 3 years. But food industry bosses have said that the checks will add billions to the cost of doing their business with the EU. Customers at supermarkets, restaurants and takeaways could pay more as a result. Zoe, are you happy to pay more for Brexit?
Well, only as a sort of sick sidekick to just show how ridiculous Brexit was. As a sort of, it's the small businesses that I feel really, really concerned for in this situation. These physical checks coming in have been described as a light touch. I mean, people don't even know how these checks are going to go about. And smaller businesses are, of course, not going to be able to absorb the extra costs like larger businesses will, at a time when we've already got a cost of living crisis, people are struggling with rent, all of those things. This is not what we need, and it seems entirely pointless. What we used to import without these checks from Europe, what has changed with their standards and our accepting standards of meat and nuts that are coming in?
Well, it's a very good question because we left Europe a while ago and these checks are only coming in now, James. What's happened between then and now that means these checks need to come in?
We've had 4 years of incompetence in terms of implementing what Brexit means and stands for, and I think that this is another example.
And do they mean higher food prices?
Well, they shouldn't do, and this is the point, is that first of all we should have a greater focus, and where has been the focus by this government, saying we make an awful lot of fruit and vegetables and grow a lot of fruit and vegetables, particularly seasonally, in this nation. Why the heck aren't we eating them? Why the heck are we importing so much? Why aren't we making it easier and better for our farmers? Look at what Clarkson's doing, and I know that some people think he's an oaf. I actually think he's done an incredible amount for British farming to say, look how difficult you, the government, and actually us, the people, have made it for farmers. You don't want farmers to do things on their land because you always complain. You don't want the noise and the mess that farming actually creates. And you don't want to pay the price that true food costs. And you don't want to shop local because you just want to go to your supermarket and buy it whenever you want and not go and eat seasonally. So I think we've got that debate combined with the fact that Brexit, to my mind, the fact that people are using this and say, this is why we shouldn't have had Brexit, this is a nonsense, because in fact, a lot of the regulations are completely pointless. So many of the checks already happen, for example, in Holland. All these checks, which there's purporting to do here in the UK, happen on the way out of the port in Holland. So, to my mind, we should be looking at practical and sensible solutions. First of all, to deal with and make sure that we have good trading relationships with everybody in Europe. And you should have the same rules applying to anything that comes from all around the world. And to have light touch and to have these new regulations just shows that we've got a government that can't think beyond, I don't know, anything that doesn't come out of their rear end. It's just extraordinary.
But hold on, you're saying that we shouldn't have to have these border checks then. But isn't that what leaving the EU
is all about? But we should have border checks, but we should have border checks that work across the board for everything that's coming in. We can't even stop people who are turning up on small boats, let alone whether we've got some, some strange disease coming in and a French camembert. To my mind, it seems to be that we don't have the priorities in terms of working out where our borders are, what's important, what we should spend money on and what we shouldn't.
But OK, I might have missed your argument here, but if we're going to have border checks that we didn't before, that is going to increase the amount of time that something is at the borders, which
it depends what you check. And my view would be,
more money.
Yeah, but we should understand what the EU checks are. And if, for example, we're dealing with food safety, which is what they say this is, then I'm sorry, but the EU does have very strong food safety rules. And we should be saying, what are the rules that are coming out of the EU? Are we happy with those? If we're not happy in a particular area, then that's where we'll test.
That's what I don't understand.
And I don't understand. And again, we have been allowed to understand, or we're told that this is what needs to be done for our food security. It's a load of BS. We are being sold down the river by people who are, their level of incompetence knows absolutely no bounds. And for anybody who did vote to leave the EU, they're wringing their hands in horror at what this government has done in terms of implementation. And for everybody who didn't want to leave, they're just almost, laughing with glee, saying, well, we told you this was going to happen.
Well, no, I don't know if they told us this was going to happen. I mean, Jacob, if I'm remembering right, Jacob Rees-Mogg had said said that food prices will go down after Brexit. So hasn't this just proved that Brexit hasn't worked?
Well,
it hasn't
it's
provided
because of
what it was supposed
implementation.
to.
Because first of all, we're betwixt and between. We've still got a whole load of EU regulation that sits there that probably doesn't help in terms of our farming industry. Because we had many, many years where we had to comply with the EU's farming and regulatory policies that seem to bend very much towards the French and the overproduction that goes in some areas of that market. Do you remember cheese mountains and wine mountains and food mountains and all that stuff? And what we haven't done is we haven't capitalised on the incredible farming industry that we have, because we've got political parties that are so busy on the left fighting anti-Semitism and on the right fighting each other that we can't focus on what will actually help us as people and our small businesses and our medium-sized businesses, combined with the fact that we allow supermarkets to run roughshod over any small supplier because of their power.
Zoe, does James have a point here? Actually, we should be buying our fruit and our meat and our dairy products British made. Why aren't we doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Yeah.
So that's going to be a benefit of Brexit then, because it's going to mean that imported foods are so much more expensive that we end up buying more British. Great news.
Well, if we have the people to pick the fruit and veg in the first place as well, that's the other issue, isn't it? You know, also, but I completely agree with you. And, you know, supermarkets just squashing the price of certain things. For many, many years, we've been living a sort of utopian dream when it comes to buying food. And you pick something up and anybody with half a brain would go, that price cannot reflect the manufacturing and the work and the human involvement that's gone into making that product. Every time you pick up a pint of milk, you've got to question that.
The money has gone to the distribution. So in business, people understand that distribution is king. That's key. That's where you get paid. And within supermarkets, they have that distribution power. And we've lost, if you like, the ability for farmers to be able to communicate. They're actually doing the job. They're making the produce. They're growing the produce. They're creating the milk and all this other stuff, and we're not valuing it.
OK, let's go to the phones. Bernard from Norwich, are you happy to pay more at the supermarket till for Brexit?
Brexit ruined us. I tell you why, I've got a friend who imports a lot of flowers and everything from abroad, and his bill has gone up between £300 and £500 a load.
Yes.
So how can we? Where's the money got to come from for this man to carry on?
But I didn't catch what your friend was. Flowers.
Yeah.
Well, to the people, the cost will be passed on to the people buying those flowers, so flowers will go up in price.
Well, listen, I'm country bred and born, right? And we're hammered the farmers for years. And when the farmers stop farming, where's the food got to come from?
Where's the what going to come from, sorry?
Where's the food got to come from?
Well, potentially we just start buying more British food, don't we? If we can't afford, if the price of anything coming from Europe is going up, then we'll just start buying British fruit and vegetables, and that's perhaps what we should be doing anyway.
Yeah, but we aren't producing it. Everyone around here I know are going out of producing stuff because they can not put it on to the supermarkets because they won't pay that price.
Maybe if the prices start going up, they become, then British farmers can bring their prices up. Maybe the government will start subsidising British farmers and helping them out with producing the produce. I mean, it could be of a benefit to Britain, potentially.
There's too much red tape for our farmers to carry on how they are. And I know people in the farming industry and they are really struggling. Mm-hmm. I admire all the farmers.
But that's what James is saying, that we haven't been investing in that industry.
Well, I had a friend who had 30,000 chickens, and the last 2 years he was losing money because the supermarkets wouldn't pay him the money and he would have been bankrupt. So how do you justify that?
Well, you don't. I mean, that is what James is saying, is that if we start buying more British, the prices are going up anyway, Bernard, and we'll just start eating more British food for a price that we should be paying for it.
So who's got to produce it? I'm telling you, when I go around the countryside, the farmers are not producing it because they cannot get the money for it. Okay. So they aren't going to costs £100 to produce it and only get £80 a tonne back.
Yeah, I think James's point is that won't be the case, that we'll start paying more for it. Is that right?
I'm not sure necessarily that's my case, but I think that we need to have a proper conversation about farming, about the sustainability of it, and also the way that supermarkets behave, sometimes more responsibly than on other occasions. But also it's about our own behaviour. So consumers and where you buy that. And I understand that if, for example, you live in an urban area, going to a farm shop is difficult. But if you live in a rural area, I'm amazed that people have these incredible farm shops, fresh produce grown on the land, and then they'll happily go down to their local supermarket, and because it's a couple of pennies cheaper, and they'll go and buy the carrots that have been imported or the potatoes that have been imported. Or
doesn't that show what the British people value, though? They value cheaper food. They want to save money.
Sometimes they do, but I think we have to understand what the true cost of that means.
Yeah.
And we have to
understanding that cost. Yeah,
it's understanding that cost. And then, you have people banging on about net zero and reducing our carbon emissions and preaching to us about this stuff, but then they're very happy to go and eat all the things that they eat, or have things delivered every 5 seconds by drivers who come in and knock in their takeaways.
Okay, I feel like you're just saying, James, people need to be educated into why they have to pay more for things and be happy to pay more.
No,
in
it's
a
not
cost
about
of living
paying more.
crisis.
No, but people probably wouldn't have to pay more if you had a self-sustaining industry where we really focused on buying British, on identifying seasons and buying seasonally.
Well,
and
Bernard says
understanding
there's nobody making British food anymore.
They are. It's just that they're not necessarily making as much as we could. And I think we just need to focus back on farming and stop hammering the farmer, so that the farmers, it's a more profitable business to go into.
Bernard, I mean, chicken farms, the prices have been reduced and reduced and reduced and reduced. The benefit to the customer, the detrimental to the welfare of the animals.
Chicken, yes.
Yeah, but food has a cost, and that cost, does have to. We have to pay
and it's
that
labour
cost
and
at some
feed
point.
and transport and distribution.
Well,
and all these
it's a
other
cost
things.
of living crisis. I'd love to know if you at home are happy with the fact that realistically we're all going to have to pay more and more for food. Bernard, thank you for your call. Edward for Cumbria, what's your thoughts on this?
I think, with respect to the panel, a lot of you are missing the point. I don't think it's anything to do with Brexit, personally. I think the problem is the government has sat back and allowed the big multinationals, supermarkets, etc., to dictate the price that they're going to buy to the farmer. The farmer has no choice but to sell it at that price, or he doesn't sell it. Mm-hmm. They then put a substantial markup on the actual price they're paying for it. Put it on the shelf, knowing that general public, me, you, everybody else out there, have no choice. We have to eat. So it's just constant markup at their end.
Yeah, we're looking at what we're doing to the farmers and that what you're answering there. But what I'm interested here is we're having border force brought into to practice in Europe now, and that's going to increase the price of our food. Are we happy for those border checks to be done? And are we happy to be paying for them in the supermarkets?
Well, this is the thing. I don't think the general public should be paying for it. I think the supermarkets should be paying for it. Look at the record profits that Tesco made for using one. I know there's many other supermarkets out there, but they made substantial profits in the last 12 months. They did make substantial
profits.
But I think part of the problem here, Edward, is that when you talk about the profits which are being made by the big supermarkets, and I tend to agree with you, and I think that was one of the points I was making, the difficulty that we got is particularly with small businesses. So small businesses, if you operate a local cheese shop that, for example, sells English cheese, that's one thing. But if they sell French cheese or Italian cheese or all the other things that come in from Europe, they're going to have to.
Liz Truss here. What's wrong with buying imported cheese?
No, there's nothing.
Stop that.
No, there's nothing wrong with buying imported cheese. But if you are a small business and you've got to pay these ridiculous new costs, then it's going to put up your prices. If you're a big supermarket, then they can obviously absorb more of these costs. And also it's to do with the way they've priced these things in terms of, if you're a small importer, the prices are the same to put a smaller load through as a bigger load. I mean, it's just a nonsense in terms of how it's been implemented.
Will have an absolute. Most florists are little independent, businesses, and I have a friend who has a florist shop near me, and she tells me how hard it is now, with the imports from Holland, because most of our
and the price of a bouquet of flowers is already really expensive. Yeah. I was listening to a garden centre, a person that owned a garden centre, talking about these border checks, and they have absolutely no idea how much of a cost this is going to cost them, because they don't know how long these border checks are going to take. They don't know the damage that it will cause. There's so many unknowns at the moment, so I suppose a bit of time will have to be taken to find out the true cost of this. Edward, thank you very much for your call. Peter from Greater Manchester, what do you think? Is this a price worth paying for Brexit?
No, it's not. But the point is, Brexit, no government can make Brexit work because it was sold on lies. Boris Johnson told lies, Nigel Farage told lies, and they told so many lies that when Brexit happened, they didn't know what they were getting.
Well, did they?
They stopped the people from coming over here to pick the stuff out of the fields now, so the farmers are not even planting the food. So the food is not there. So when are they going to realise that all the lies they told is coming back on them now and stop blaming everybody else and say that we were wrong?
Well, it's interesting that you say they lied. Do you think, Zoe, they lied, or is this just sheer incompetence?
I think there were definite lies along the way. We all know there were definite lies along the way.
What, the oven-ready deal?
Well, Boris's boss, the NHS lie. I mean, there were...
Sorry, but they've actually spent more than that on the side of the bus on the NHS in terms of increased expenditure. But I think that the difficulty that we have is that you had lies on both sides. So you had lies from people who wanted to stay in, and then you had projections and people got it wrong. I think the biggest problem that we've got is actually implementation of Brexit as opposed to the idea.
But it sounds like you would say it was incompetence, James.
Oh, the level of incompetence. I like to think that on occasion I can demonstrate huge levels of incompetence. Not to the level of our politicians in terms of how they have behaved, what they have done, the reckless way in which they've implemented policies, chopped and changed their leaders, chopped and changed their plans, lack of, and then also I think there's obfuscation and dragging of heels by civil servants who have done everything they possibly can to derail the process because they didn't want it in the first place. They're just everything that could have gone wrong in terms of executing Brexit has done.